She was just the third woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court of Canada and, of course, the first woman to become Chief Justice. Beverley McLachlin held the post for 17 years, making her the court's longest-serving chief. Through 4 prime ministers and landmark rulings that continue to shape jurisprudence and this country. She retired from the bench last year, but certainly hasn't been retiring, and we're pleased to welcome her back to our studio. So nice to have you in that chair again.
So nice to be here.
You were here 9 years ago.
9 years ago.
Yeah. You done anything with your time since then? No, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, when am I supposed to call you now anyway?
Well, that's a good question. I tell people just to call me Beverley.
I'm not going to call you Beverley.
But people can't do it. So most of them just call me Judge or Justice or Your Honor, or I'm not fussy about it.
Your Honor sounds good. Let's go with that.
Okay.
What have you been up to in this first year since you retired from the bench?
Well, the first part, I retired December 15th of 2017, and I still had some outstanding judgments to work on. There's a provision that you can contribute to judgments during the 6-month period after your retirement. That's so there's not a you can complete the work that you've started. And I did some of that. I went out to Vancouver and I worked remotely, and then I also was pretty busy just trying to wind up my records and archives, and the court was wonderful. They gave me a lot of help. But after I came there in 1989, and so there were just piles
You got a lot of stuff.
Records and so on. So all that had to be sorted and archived. That took a lot of time. I wrote a little piece of fiction, which came out under the title of Full Disclosure.
There it is, right there.
Which has been great fun. And I also have been continuing with some of the events, some of the invitations I had undertaken before I retired, giving lectures here and there and doing some public speaking. So I've been really, really busy.
You haven't been sitting around on your couch potato type thing?
No, I think I've been busier than ever.
Well, the last time you were here, which as I say was almost a decade ago, we did talk at that time about what some of your more interesting judgments were. And here's what you had to say back then. Sheldon, if you would.
There have been so many interesting ones, but let's consider, for example, the reference on secession, the right of a province to secede. That was a reference sent to us by the federal government. Can a province unilaterally secede under domestic law, under international law? And we were required in that case to really go into areas of the Constitution, areas of the law, that had not been well explored. And our decision in that case still stands, I think, in terms of world jurisprudence as one of the first decisions in that area.
So that's what you said 9 years ago. Now that you've had an additional 9 years of time on the bench, would you update that answer at all?
Years. I still stay with the same answer. That was a very, very important decision. I also think that during those years, the court made some very important decisions on Indigenous rights, and I would rank those as extremely important for the country and interesting jurisprudence. I was very fortunate in my time as a judge. I was appointed to the county court in British Columbia in '81, and then I sat as a judge until 2017. And the charter came in, and Indigenous rights guarantees came in '82. So my whole career kind of paralleled those new developments in Canadian law.
Now that you're not on the bench anymore,
wonderful.
Can I ask you some questions that you wouldn't have answered when you were there, but now you might?
You can ask.
I can. For example, okay, so in your heart of hearts, what do you think of the notwithstanding clause in the charter?
Well, my answer on that is that it's there. It's there as much as any other part of the charter. It was part of the, I suppose, negotiations that led up to our adopting the charter. And thus far, I don't think that it's been misused. In effect, the notwithstanding clause says, well, we're giving you all these rights, and they're constitutional, but the legislature or parliament can override them for 5 years. So that sounds antithetical. It sounds very
Well, it sounds
problematic.
like classic Canadian compromise in some respects.
It is, and it was the concern that parliamentary democracy was going to be replaced entirely by constitutional democracy, and Parliament would lose the power in legislatures, and nobody knew how the judges were going to act and so on. So I can quite understand why it's there. It hasn't been used really at all very much outside
Quebec?
Quebec, where it was used to override a court decision on language rights.
Well, we almost had it used in the province of Ontario a few months ago when Doug Ford wanted to reduce the size of city council. Had he used it under those circumstances, do you think that would have been an appropriate use of that clause?
Well, I never answer hypotheticals.
Dang. I was hoping you'd go there. Really hoping you'd go there. Really? Not even this one, eh?
Well, I'm not in a position to really comment on that. I'm just glad that it wasn't necessary, or the issue went away. I think it would be unfortunate, I will say this, it would be unfortunate if the notwithstanding clause was used routinely to override court decisions.
Understood. During much of your time on the court, you got roughly somebody's done the math here, roughly 73% of your decisions were unanimous. And that's obviously very different from the way it works south of the border. And I'm wondering, what's the trick to getting unanimity among 9 people who have different backgrounds, speak different languages, have very different life experiences, et cetera?
I think what happened in our case is that we had a lot of discussion on all of the cases, first of all, so that helped narrow differences. And the second thing is that I think our judiciary is less politicized than the judiciary in the United States.
I'd like to know, now that you've had a chance to step back from your former duties, what do you miss the least about being Chief Justice?
What do I miss the least? I think it's the sense of, and I didn't realize this till after I was no longer Chief Justice, but I miss the least the load. And by that I mean I wasn't even aware I was carrying a load, but I was Chief Justice for almost 18 years. And you're conscious of bearing a huge responsibility and not making, if you could possibly help it, any missteps that would bring justice or the court into disrepute. And you wear that all the time. And I wasn't even aware I was wearing it until 2 or 3 months later. I thought, oh, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I mean, I'm going to try to live my life properly, and as I always have, but I don't bear that intangible kind of responsibility. And I hadn't even realized it, so that was interesting. I felt lighter. I felt freer.
And I should ask the flip side as well, which is, what do you miss the most?
I miss actually being able to sit on the cases. I mean, I hear, as everyone hears, well, the court's going to take on this case and that case, and this is such an interesting issue. And part of me is wanting to be there. I would love to, but I know it's over.
Well, you're not totally divorced from the court right now, right? You've got this gig in Hong Kong right now?
That's a different court, yeah.
It's a different court, but you're still...
Yeah, I'm still a judge.
You're still judging.
I'm still a judge.
Tell us what that's about. What are you doing
so
there?
I'm glad that I'm still a judge. I am a foreign judge on the Hong Kong Court of Final Appeal. And I'll try to explain that quickly. When the agreement was made that Hong Kong would join China, 50-year interim, it was agreed that they would keep the British system of justice that they had always enjoyed. And as part of that, one of the terms was that there would always be an outside judge from another country, usually it was England, who would sit with the judges. I think it was perhaps thought that the public would really understand that they still had their independent common law justice system. And that's the way it's worked. So most of the judges filling these positions have been from the courts in England. There have been a couple from Australia and perhaps elsewhere, but I was the first Canadian named. And the first women, along with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the United Kingdom, Brenda Hale.
That's not bad.
Yeah, I was very honored by that.
We got a clip on this. Here's what you had to say 9 years ago. You ready for this?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Sheldon. Let's roll this.
I've been on the Supreme Court of Canada for 10 years. I'm not thinking so much in terms of I'm a woman or a man. I'm just a judge of the Supreme Court of Canada. I'm a jurist. So frankly, in terms of what goes through my mind at the initial point, it's not so much colored by gender.
Okay, again, that was then, but now, you know, first woman Chief Justice, first woman on this Hong Kong court. Yeah. Any change of view about the significance of that?
Yeah,
now?
what I only came to realize gradually during my time as Chief Justice was the symbolic and representational value of having women occupy positions of prominence and importance. One of my friends calls it the visibility factor. So many parents, young women, children, little girls came to me over the years and said, we're just so thrilled by having you there. I got so many letters from little girls saying they wanted to be Chief Justice of Canada. And I realized that it didn't have a lot to do with me. It had to do with the fact that there was a woman heading up an important institution. It sends the message that women can do whatever they want to do. They can have the highest positions if they choose to and if they work hard, and that we really have some semblance of equality. And that message is probably as important as anything else I ever did. I realize that now.
Kathleen Wynne, in her last press conference as Premier, said that she couldn't wait for the day when her portrait would go up alongside the 24 other men who had been Premier of Ontario for that very reason. Because when tours went through and little girls saw that a woman could have that job, it would say something big. You feel that? I
feel it, and it's absolutely much bigger. It was something I hadn't expected when I did that first clip. I hadn't experienced it to that degree. But I think it's so empowering for women and girls and fathers and mothers to turn on the news or open a newspaper and see, yeah, there's a woman doing that important job.
Now, Your Honor, don't take this the wrong way, okay? But you know who Notorious RBG is?
Yes.
Yeah, you do. Okay, so Ruth Bader Ginsburg is an Associate Justice on the Supreme Court of the United States, and she is famous. I mean, she's a rock star famous kind of person.
Absolutely.
She's a pop icon. Have we got some stuff here? Bring up some of this merchandise here. She's on, you know, she's on mugs. There's been a documentary made about her, Notorious RBG. And she's apparently, well, I don't know what she is now. She's in her mid-80s, I guess, and just broke her ribs and is not going to miss a day of work because she never misses a day of work. This is her thing. My point here is that there is a level of fame, good and bad, I guess, that American judges have that ours don't have. What do you think about that?
Oh, well, I'm glad I didn't have, but
you don't wish Canadians knew the name of their Chief Justice? Because I'm betting lots of them don't.
Yeah, well, I don't know why that's happened in the United States. It's partly this, I think it's related to this politicization of the court. Their courts have played huge roles in changing their country, Brown versus Board of Education and so on. Plus, it's a very, very legalized society. They have more than twice as many lawyers per capita, and it's their thing. And their Supreme Court is huge. And they have, of course, many more people to talk about how huge it is. So I think all of those factors contribute. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg is a wonderful jurist and was a wonderful lawyer, a wonderful champion for women's rights.
Do you know her?
I do know her, and I've known her for a long time, and I admire her enormously.
Now, the interesting thing about her is that she had a great friendship with Antonin Scalia, who was as conservative as she is liberal. Yeah. Did you ever have that kind of relationship with anybody on your court who was maybe, if not poles apart, then certainly ideologically different from you, and yet you got along and people were surprised by it?
Yeah, it's a little, we were never, I think, poles apart. Right. And I like to think that I got along with everyone. So I don't think it's as polarized as that. But I think when people looked at Justice Scalia, and I knew him too, and I didn't share all his views on legal matters, but he was a wonderful and intelligent human being. My husband and I once had a 4-day road trip with him in Switzerland. I won't bore you with how that happened, but we had a wonderful time. He was great company. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Marty Ginsburg, her husband, enjoyed his company immensely. But it's something judges do. They separate their social lives from their work lives. We know, I keep using the present tense, but I still am a judge in Hong Kong. We know as judges that we are going to have to sometimes make different decisions. We'll see things differently. We'll make different decisions than our colleague. That doesn't mean we don't like that colleague or that we don't. It's just part of our life.
So who was that person on the Canadian court who might have been much more conservative than you, but you got along anyway, and people would be surprised to hear it?
Oh, I don't think there was such a thing. I mean, there were some pretty conservative people from time to time, but no one was ever surprised that we would be friends with them. Or it just wasn't a factor on the Canadian court.
Let me try this one out then. President Trump and Chief Justice Roberts in the United States went head-to-head the other day, and they had a bit of a Twitter flame thing happening, which I wonder what went through your head when you saw the President of the United States and the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court in public having a spat.
Well, obviously that's unfortunate because each branch of government should act with respect toward the other branch of government. But I think, I'm speculating, but I speculate that the Chief Justice, when he heard comments such as, this is an Obama judge and this is a Trump judge, felt that this was a deeply flawed view of how the judiciary works. And he felt that a corrective had to be put on the record.
You had your own contretemps with a former Prime Minister, Stephen Harper.
Yes.
You two had a public spat at one point, too.
Well, I didn't spat. He
spat and you spat back? Is that how it worked?
I don't know. No, what I did is there was a certain accusation. I felt it was entirely, I knew it was entirely unjustified. So I went back and I said, issued a press release saying I hadn't done anything wrong, much less what was alleged. And these are the facts. I set out about 5 or 6 facts on the dates and let people judge for themselves.
Did he ever apologize to you?
No, I'm not, but I never asked.
You're not sitting by the phone either?
No.
I want to ask you, look, at the biggest thing any Supreme Court in the world had to deal with in the past 12 months, I think, was the Brett Kavanaugh hearings in the United States.
Yeah.
And we should just take a moment here to talk about that. When you see these incredibly partisan, dramatic, in some respects, disgusting public hearings over judicial appointments, how do you think that affects the legitimacy of the court in the public's eye?
Well, I think it really does, because many people watching those programs would say the person who ultimately is appointed, in this case Justice Kavanaugh, is likes Republicans and doesn't like Democrats. He said that practically. He said, you know, he got very political in some of his responses. So then the question becomes, you're a Democrat and you've got a big case before the Supreme Court. And you've got 9 people sitting up there. What confidence do you have that each of them is going to look at this case impartially? So that's the problem. The more the rhetoric in those confirmation hearings gets political, the more the public starts to doubt whether there really is impartial justice. And of course, I think that's why Chief Justice Roberts wanted to issue his corrective.
Right. We've got a few minutes left here, and I would like to spend it talking about how accessible you think our justice system is to people in Canada today.
Well, I'm really glad you raised that, because this is something I was very concerned with when I was Chief Justice, and it remains concerning. I know that many initiatives have been taken, and I do believe things are getting better. But For every step or two we make forward, it seems like there's a step back. For example, the pro bono program in Ontario was really, really gaining a lot of momentum. Terrific buy-in from law firms who saw it as not only their duty to provide pro bono work, but services, but it was providing lots of opportunities for young people to get into court and do the sort of lawyering they really wanted to do. So we have a program that's growing, that's actually reducing court costs because it increases court costs, which are paid for by the provincial government in the end, by the people, to have people who don't know the law or how to proceed in court taking up judge time. So we have an excellent program, and now it's in jeopardy. And I felt very strongly about it. It's been rescued. It's been given a temporary reprieve. They were at the point they were going to have to close the clinics in Toronto and Ottawa, which are doing such good work. And apart from that, it just leaves many Canadians who would have a chance at justice without justice if they can't get representation. So I think we have to do more. People expect justice of our system. They expect that if they're treated unfairly or harmed, they should be able to go to court and get justice. And the same on the criminal side. So it's a deep expectation. I know it probably is hard to, if you're sitting around the cabinet table, say, I need this money for justice, when everyone wants money for health and education. But justice is just as fundamental. If you think back through history, justice, the state supporting a good justice system has always been very important. And it's more important now than it ever was. So I'm hoping that we will take the little checks we have and move on to greater heights in response. There's so many people now who understand the need for access to justice. People in the legal community who are committed to providing it. It costs a little bit of money, but you know that's money saved because you're going to be wasting it in delayed trials and procedural problems in the courts.
Well, let's see if they listen. Can I sneak in one more question? You're going to give me a little time? Okay. Take a look at that monitor against the wall right there. We're going to put a picture up. Does that look familiar?
It sure does.
Okay. This is a Robert McInnis painting of Pincher Creek, Alberta, which is where you're from, which has a whopping 3,642 population now. It's grown a lot since you left. As you packed up your stuff upon leaving the Supreme Court of Canada, what ended up happening to that painting?
It's in my home now, and it's hanging on the wall. And I'm very, very pleased to have it with me because not only is it a very beautiful painting, but it's very evocative of my roots, and that's very important to me. It'll always have a very important place in my heart.
It is quite amazing that somebody from Pincher Creek, Alberta became the first female Supreme Court Chief Justice in Canadian history.
Yeah. Well, we also had Chief Justice Warren Winkler
of
Ontario,
there too.
And he's from my little town. He's a couple of years ahead of me, I hasten to say, but we've had a lot of justices come from that town.
Must be something in that water that we
There
saw in
must
that
be.
painting. Your Honor, the former Madam Chief Justice, whatever I should call you, this was a delight. Shall we do it again in 9 more years?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, you're on.
Thank you.
That's Beverley McLachlin, the former Supreme Court Chief Justice for Canada.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.